Good evening and welcome to this regular meeting of the Lakeville Area Schools Board of Education. This meeting is officially called to order. Please rise and join in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Board members in attendance tonight include Director Kelleher, Director Thompson, Director David Anderson, Chair Baker, Director Carly Anderson, and Director Lind. The board is joined by Interim Superintendent Michael Bauman and members of the Executive Cabinet, Dr. Emily McDonald, Executive Director of Student Services Michelle Humphrey, and Bill Holmgren. All right, so we'll go ahead and go into good news.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Before I get to good news, I just want to do a public service announcement, if I may. Thursday, October 24th at 6 o'clock at Lakeville South High School. That's Cougar Country. We will be doing a levy presentation. A second levy presentation for the public will be conducted Tuesday, October 29th, I believe right here in this very room. So that's at 6 p.m. for both of those events, and just want to make sure everybody knows about that. So good news. Lakeville always has good news. Lakeville Area Schools has Students of the Month recognition program that highlights 3 students each month. Students can be nominated by anyone in Lakeville Area Schools community, students, staff, families, and community members. We're excited to announce that October's students are Shay Johnson from Small Wonders Preschool, okay, this is going to be a little challenging for me, so bear with me, Vijaya Manikandan, and she's 5th grader at Highview Elementary, and Elena Anaya, 9th grade, Lakeville South High School. Congratulations to each one of those students. Staff of the Month. Lakeville Area Schools excited to have a monthly recognition program that highlights staff members nominated by anyone in the Lakeville Area Schools community. And we're excited to announce that October's staff are Carrie Sauber, 2nd and 3rd grade teacher at Lakeville Online Academy, and John Sheehan, physical education teacher at John F. Kennedy Elementary School. Thank you for all you do and being wonderful nominees and very worthy. Century Sisters excel at World Martial Arts Games. So 2 Century Middle School students made their mark on the global stage at the World Martial Arts Games held in the Czech Republic. And that happened on September 20th through the 22nd. The Mlozdik sisters, Adelaide and Sydney. Adelaide is an 8th grader and Sydney is a 6th grader. They aim to come home with 1 medal each, competing against over 1,700 martial artists from 33 different countries. The girls showcased their skills and took home 3 medals each. So when you're at Century, just be careful, because they got some superstars over there. 9 Lakeville Area Schools seniors named National Merit Semifinalists. 7 students from Lakeville North High School and 2 students from Lakeville South High School. They have been announced as Class of 2025 National Merit Semifinalists in the 70th Annual National Merit Scholarship Program. These 9 Lakeville area seniors are among 16,000 semifinalists across the country. And you can view a full list of names on our district website at isd194.org/news. Lakeville area students forge new paths at Changemaker Hub. On October 3rd, a group of students from Lakeville Pathways Academy, Lakeville North High School, and Lakeville South High School attended an immersive day-long event called Changemaker Hub. Hosted by World Savvy and Prior Lake Savage area schools, students, staff, and community members came together from various neighboring districts. Changemaker Hub united students, educators, school leaders, and community members. Throughout the day, participants engaged as equals to reflect on the current education system. They engaged in dialogue across their roles and generations and collaboratively imagine what the future of teaching and learning could look like. And you can read more about all these amazing things happening in the district also at isd194.org/news. And that is the good news report for today, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. We'll go on to board communications. We didn't have any community participants in public comment or any of our stakeholder sessions this month, so we don't have an update from that. And we're just starting to have some of our advisory councils meet, so I'll start us out on Community Ed met this month for the first time this year. I just wanted to share a few numbers from that meeting. We were going over like our current, like the past year and what the impact was for community ed. They had 25,417 estimated total enrollments in classes and events. When you see the numbers like that, it's kind of pretty amazing what that community ed is doing. They also had 192,766 estimated hours of community facility use. So that just kind of shows you the impact that community ed is having within our district. Do we have any other board members that attended any advisory council meetings yet this year? No? Okay. Anybody else have anything to share? All right, so we'll go ahead and move on. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda tonight?
So moved.
All right, we have a motion by Director Lind. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Director David Anderson. Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, we'll put it to a vote. All in favor of approving the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Are there any items that board members would like to remove from the consent agenda for further discussion? Director Thompson.
I'd like to pull item I, contract renewal.
Okay. Are there any other items that board members would like to remove for further discussion? Director Thompson?
Yeah, I just want to validate that the Lakeville South Awesome Band is going to Hawaii. Is that what I read?
On the consent agenda?
Yeah, on a field trip, which is awesome.
Yeah, I
So I
think
just
so.
want to say, hey, they get to go to Hawaii, which is pretty awesome.
That's pretty cool, yeah.
That's it. And then the second thing I want to say is I saw that the calendar for 2025, 26, and the 26, 27, I didn't notice, I noticed there weren't any significant days off. I'm assuming that the READ Act and all the other curriculums and things that we need to teach all of our staff doesn't impact that. Normally, I thought these are something that we review during
Right,
a working session.
I think you're a little bit like ahead of yourself. Did you want to remove the calendar and have that as a discussion item?
Oh, yeah, let's pull that too.
Okay, all right. Because right now, we're just pulling items for further discussion.
Got
and
it.
then, yeah. If any other board members don't have anything else to remove, like, do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda minus items H and I?
So moved.
We have a motion by Director Carly Anderson. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Director Lind. Any further discussion on the consent agenda? Okay, hearing none, we'll put it to a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. All right, so we'll go down to the consent agenda discussion items. Director Thompson, do you want to talk about the calendar update?
Yeah,
You
well,
wanna-
just a question. I mean, normally I thought we normally review these during working sessions, so I'm not sure if this is a newer version or a version from last year that is just, here's another version. Then I saw the year after that, so now I'm like, are we 2 years out? But more importantly, I didn't see any significant days off that would be impacting our staff, and wasn't sure if the curriculum training that needs to be done for the READ Act and all the math curriculum isn't impacting stuff like that. And then I think there was a couple emails around other holidays being requested, so making sure that we had a chance to talk.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yes, so traditionally past practice in the district is to do 2 calendars at a time. Normally, those calendars come out in January or February of the year prior, so we are a little bit late. And I know that we have had quite a number of requests from families and staff who want to know when the breaks are and things like that so they can plan. We do have members of our community and spouses and partners of staff members that have to bid a year in advance for vacation time. So that's one of the reasons why we're bringing both of those calendars forward. What I can tell you is both of the calendars are basically a rollover from what we've done this year, with one exception. And that is that we used to have 2 TDE days in the calendar for staff. What we have done is actually removed those. There were dollars associated with that. So if staff came, they were optional days. If staff came, they could get paid for work completion on that day. What we did was to shorten the calendar so we weren't going so late into June, which is a challenge for some families and staff. They want to be done earlier in June. We removed those 2 days and we went to piloting a results-only environment, meaning staff can do that work anytime, anywhere, any day. And if they do the work completion, then they get the dollars associated with showing up. So they don't have to show up on a particular day to do the work. They just do the work when it works for them. If it's completed, they get the dollars. So we're going to test that out and see if that works. What that does is that gets us done 2 days earlier in the calendar, and is 2 fewer days that, staff don't have to report on those TDE days, but most of them do. Other than that, we have basically the same breaks for EM week conference, for the major winter break, the major spring break, et cetera. We also have the additional PD days in the calendar to accommodate year 2 of the READ Act. So basically, the staff that did not get trained this year will get trained next year. And so basically, we're looking at a very similar calendar. In terms of the holidays discussion, I know there's been a lot of discussion around that over the years. What I can say is that we do look at those holidays and try to accommodate where we can. Where we can't, we do make sure that our buildings are well informed, that students cannot be held accountable for being absent on those days. They are excused. Makeup work is permitted. It's not an ideal situation, but that's how we've had to handle it for most holidays that are outside of our sort of traditional school calendar. Really, because of the number of instructional days, instructional hours, and contract requirements, PD requirements, et cetera, the only day that we're really going to be able to make any significant changes in the calendar is if we start before Labor Day. So I think, that needs to be an ongoing conversation. Obviously, we would want to involve the new superintendent in that conversation, as that's and we would want to do a lot of research and data collection from staff and families, et cetera, if we decide to go in that direction.
So just one question. I know some districts have taken like President's Day or Martin Luther King Day, and they've used that as one of their PD days just so that, there's a break for students, but not necessarily a break for staff. Is that something that could be done around the Diwali holiday?
One of our issues is that we have to pay close attention to is around instructional minutes.
Right.
So in order to get our instructional minutes in, we'd be in a different place if we didn't have the READ Act.
Right,
The
that's what
READ
I
Act,
was, like,
the READ
could a
Act
READ
takes
Act date
5
be on
days
that?
out of
Yeah.
student contact time already. So it would have to be, and I think that there's a deep discussion there because there are other holidays as well that then we would need to look at accommodating. We can't accommodate all holidays and actually meet the requirements of the state right now. So this has been an ongoing conversation for quite a number of years since I have led the calendar committee about how to be how to have a calendar that is more flexible and provides some more flexibility for staff and for students. And we're just, unfortunately, with the after Labor Day start and the desire to be out as early as possible in June, we don't have the capacity in the days unless we look at not having an MEA or not having a spring break or doing something like that. So it's really it's a tough give and take there. But what I can say is that the people on the calendar committee, they do take this very seriously. I mean, it's something that they look to resolve. There are a couple of big sort of ticket items that we try every year to resolve in the calendar, and it just gets difficult with our requirements. So I know that's not a very satisfying answer, but we'll continue to try to have the conversation and see what we can do. And I do think, Chair Baker, that once we get through this READ Act, we might be in a different place to be able to do some things and have conversations about what it might look like to start earlier.
You have a really tough job. Director Carly Anderson.
One thing that I had just mentioned to Emily, and I think Nicole as well, is just something for us to be mindful of in terms of accommodation. We do accommodate all Christian holidays, which I think historically has been the case, but it becomes an equity issue in my mind that we're accommodating one religion and not others. And so, as we start to explore what to do with those additional holidays, even if we're giving one for one religion, if we're not doing it for all, it
Right.
becomes
Yes.
an issue. So just wanted to raise that point. I know historically that's been the approach of the district, but we're changing, and I think we need to be more mindful of that.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Director Thompson?
Yeah,
and
so
then Director
two questions.
Kelleher.
One, I just want to make sure that I'm clear that if we approve this, and we are approving the calendar for the next school year and the year after that. And so that gives a 2-year window to have further dialogue, Carly, around what does that look like as we continue to evolve with our student population and so forth. The second question that I have, which I totally forgot, so go ahead.
So can you just let everybody know who's on your calendar committee?
Well, I don't have the specific
Well,
list
not
in
who,
front of
but
me, but
the roles.
but we have our EML president, Ms. Carrie Pop, myself. We have a couple of our directors at the district office, specifically those in teaching and learning. We have representative from teachers at elementary, middle, and high school. We also include representation from LEAF as well as our at least one AD, because they're with activities and things that are going on. We want to make sure that we're not overlapping or scheduling something important there as well. So, we try to have a pretty broad representation in the group to bring voice to that committee. One of the things that we've talked about as we have floated around, particularly idea of looking at data collection and starting earlier and those types of things, was really to engage our families more in that process, because if we're going to make a significant change, we certainly would want them to be involved in that as well. So
Thank you.
that's for our next group, I think.
Yep, thank you.
Thanks for sharing that. Director Thompson?
Yeah, so the question that I had was spring break. And so I feel like every year when we have spring break, we get some emails, or when the calendar goes out, we get some emails saying, why is spring break the last week of March and going into 5-6 days into April? Now, I don't have the answer because I don't know. So if you've got your soundbite, like what is the answer on why it is, and why has it always been that way? And I feel like I always get, I've received emails around parents saying, this is the middle of like tryouts or traveling, whatever, and then they can't go on vacation and so I love to know, have we always done it this late, or has it just been recently? And when I say recently, like the past 3 to 5 years, or is there a path forward to ever go back, or is like, this is it, this is our standard moving forward? Just want to make sure, because again, I get emails from parents saying, hey, sports-wise, they don't get to enjoy this break due to other commitments.
Sure. There's a couple of reasons. This is one of the reasons why we do try to have our ADs in the room, so at least we have that picture and that voice, not unlike our holidays. Even if we can't accommodate, we want to be aware of the things that are going on that may have significant impacts across the system. There's a couple of things. I would say that the two biggest are, one of the things that we try to do in our calendar is make our quarters and or semesters even in terms of days. So that matters specifically at the high school because, for example, if you're teaching a semester course and semester 1 has 85 days and semester 2 has 75 days, you have 10 fewer days to teach your content. So the message that we hear frequently from our secondary, specifically our high school, is that they like to see those days evened out. And so when you do that, then you don't want to put a break right before the last week of a quarter, for example, because then kids have to come back, do a week, and then they have to transition to a new quarter. So we're trying to figure out how to balance that and how to place the breaks in a way that make natural sense in terms of delivering content. Okay, so that's one reason. The other reason is that we have a contractual day off in some of our contracts that is basically the Friday before when Easter would be, okay? So that Friday prior is in some contracts as a day off, vacation, day off. So we have had to, in order to get our instructional days and instructional hours and maximize time with kids in the calendar, we have had to butt that up next to a break in order to make that work. So that's another reason why we do it. But really we try to make sense of a calendar from our day-to-day academic, instructional standpoint first, and then we try to accommodate other things as we can throughout that. So I'll leave that to also say that it's up to us where we place that. We make the choice, the calendar committee makes the choice to put that in a particular spot on the calendar, so.
Any further questions on the calendar? Thank you, Dr. McDonald. Thank you. Okay. Hearing none, we'll go ahead and put that to a motion. Do we have a motion to approve the calendar update?
I'll make a motion.
Motion by Director Kelleher. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Director Carly Anderson. Any further discussion on the calendar? Okay, hearing none, we'll put it to a vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. All right, the next item for discussion is the contract renewal. Director Thompson?
Yeah, I believe we might have received an email around 2 contracts with 2 executive directors looking to get approved today. I'm looking at the durations, and it says July 1st of 2025 through June 30th of 2029. So as I'm reading this, if we approve this, yes, then we are agreeing to extending the contract for these 2 resources for the next 3 years. Is that my understanding?
Director,
You turned it back off.
I didn't touch it but once.
There you go.
Thank you. Rookie up here, sorry. Interim, can't hit the buttons. Director Thompson. Yes, if you're talking, the short answer is yes. The longer answer is if there's any change requirement, there's a process within those contracts to execute that, if that's your concern. I don't want to assume that's your concern.
No. Well, so I want to make sure that I'm clear that the intention was not to have a conversation around the merits of these resources that need the contract extension. I think what I have more concerned, my issue is more of, I'd like to discuss this at a working session. I'd like to just table it, and I just want to think through the up and down implications on the extension, because we have a new superintendent that hasn't been identified. We're assigning a contract for the next 3 years for 2 executive resources, and then not that I hope that they wouldn't be here. It's just that I think seeing this right away and instantly, and not having further dialogue around. Just talking through it, and also along with it, there are probably benefits that we should probably review to make sure that does it make sense to do any calibrations to any of the contract language where it makes sense. So I think what I'd like to do is, again, it is a 3-year agreement for an extension of these two executive director roles. And I think for me, I'd like to make, I don't know if, can I make a motion during this to table it, to at least discuss it at the next board meeting?
You can. Director Carly Anderson?
I'm confused because I thought we were just extending until some of the other contracts were settled.
Right.
That's
And
correct.
So,
Yes.
So,
think-
but when I'm reading this, if we say yes, we are extending until July to June 30th of 2029. That's what I'm reading. And so if there isn't an urgency to get this done instantly, like during this meeting, my preference or recommendation would be to just pause on it, make sure we talk through it at the next working session so that we are in alignment, and then come back and vote on whatever we need to vote on in November. Because if it's just an extension, that's not how I read this as. Am I mistaken on my interpretations?
I would tell you, Director Thompson, that it is an extension. It is due to the fact, and I think I wrote this in detail on the board packet, that they're going to be in a non-contract situation. The contract itself affords any refinement or adjustments, and there's no, quite magnanimously, in my view, and the reason I brought it here was so that we could offer the confidence in the work and deal with any future adjustments in accordance with what the contract allows.
Director Carly Anderson?
So we're voting to extend the contracts, and then once other things get settled, we come back and make some, like, amendments.
We can
or
make adjustments to it, correct. So right now, we have a motion on the table to table the contract renewal. So we do have that. Is there a second for that motion? Okay, I don't hear a second for that motion. Director Kelleher?
I'll make a motion to accept these two renewals, these two contract renewals for the Assistant Superintendent and Executive Director of Administrative Services.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table to approve the contract renewals. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Director Lind. Any further discussion on the contract renewals? Director Thompson?
Yeah, again, these contracts are stating that the extensions would be for the next 3 years, not saying that, and again, I want to be super clear of my content, that the individuals that are playing in this capacity have done a great job in this role. And so not that they are not deserving of this, but I think it's something that we should just maybe pause and just think through and making sure that how we want to handle this. There are additional components in here. So I will be voting no, just because it is an extension, and there hasn't been any dialogue with the group around this, around these two roles.
Any other discussion on this item? Okay, hearing none, we'll put it to a vote. All in favor of approving the contract renewal, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
All right, motion carries 5-1. All right, so that concludes all of our consent agenda discussion items. So we'll move on to reports with recommended actions, and that would be our audit acceptance is our first one. Mr. Bill Holmgren.
Madam Chair, members of the school board, and Superintendent Michael Baumann. Yes, tonight we have Caroline Stutzman from Bergen KDV to give our audit report from fiscal '24. I'll ask her to come on up, and we'll walk through the details.
Thank you, and good evening. Thank you for having me tonight. So I am the engagement partner involved in the audit of your district. So I'd like to take a few minutes of your time to go through the results of, oopsie, I maybe went the wrong way. Is that going to move it? No? Something else? That was the, maybe over here on the side. Nope. Just which one of these two? I was pushing that. That way.
It's this one right here.
Okay, you have the magic touch, I guess. All right, the down arrow, not the up arrow. Sorry about that. So again, Caroline Stutzman, and I'll take a few minutes of your time just to go through the results of the audit. So the main reason you ask us to work with you is to provide an opinion on the financial statements. That opinion is housed within the independent auditor's report. Also within the independent auditor's report, both management's responsibility as well as our responsibilities are outlined. And management's responsibility is for the preparation and fair presentation of the financial statements in accordance with GAAP, meaning they are responsible for determining the numbers. Our job then is to audit that information and provide an opinion. We aren't allowed to do both of those, a line drawn in the sand, if you will. So the opinion that we are providing is what's called an unmodified opinion. That's the highest level that you can receive, and not a change from prior years, meaning we believe the financial statements are fairly stated in all material respects as of June 30th, 2024. In addition to looking at the numbers, we also conducted our audit in accordance with government auditing standards, and that requires us to consider internal controls as we go throughout that process. We did have an item, we discussed this at the workshop with all attendees there, so I wasn't going to go through that in great detail. Those things do happen from time to time, so nothing of importance there unless there was any specific questions. Another component, when the district spends more than $750,000 of federal expenditures, an extra piece is added on, which is in accordance with uniform guidance or a single audit. You're probably more familiar with that term. The child nutrition program is the program that was tested this year. We did not have any findings related to any of that work. One final component before we look at the financial analysis is in regards to Minnesota legal compliance. The Office of the State Auditor puts together 7 checklists filled with many Minnesota state statutes that we ask a number of questions about. We did not have any findings related to any of that either. So with that, oops, oh, I went back the wrong way. With that, we'll dig into the financial analysis. So with general education aid being the largest funding source for you as a school district in the state of Minnesota, we provide information on 2 of the main factors of that calculation, much more complex than that, but 2 main drivers, which are the formula allowance as well as pupil units. So here we have the formula allowance, where it's been, what we know currently based on legislature, and focusing on that 2024 line and the 4% increase that was received this year. Then we look at pupil units here. And so we start with your resident ADMs. So these are only the students living within your district. And for 2024, resident ADMs increased by 130, some fluctuation between the grade levels that are presented there. But as I mentioned at the end of the day, an increase of 30 and 733 over the 5 years that are presented here. Then if we apply the weighting factors that you see at the top of this slide, as well as take into consideration open enrollment, you arrive at adjusted weighted ADM. This is the number that you are paid off of from the state. So the first line is the residents. That's the same number we just looked at with the weighting factors applied to it. And then the next 2 pieces there, the gains and loss, that's the impact of open enrollment. So the net impact of those 2. At the end of the day, the adjusted weighted ADM increased by 78. So again, that is the amount you're paid off of from the state. So then we shift gears a bit and look at the actual numbers. And we start with your general fund sources of revenue. So in total, general fund revenues increased 13%. There was an increase in property taxes with an increase in the levy. Revenue from state sources increased for a few different reasons, a couple of which we talked about already, that increase in the formula allowance, the increase in student counts, as well as an increase in the special education entitlement. Federal revenues decreased, just a decrease in the COVID dollars that were coming through as that kind of starts to wrap up. And then the other revenues, the largest driver there is interest income, and really just the result of better market conditions this year compared to last year.
Can I just make a comment?
Absolutely.
And back on that other slide, I don't know if you want to, so just to
figure
be
it out.
noted too, that the local property taxes, where you mentioned it had an increase, that we did have a voter-approved levy. So that's where some of those increases come from, are voter-approved.
Yes, correct. So here we look at general fund expenditures. Pie chart comparison year over year. Just to touch, most of the changes from one year to the next are less than 1%, so pretty consistent spending year over year from this perspective. A couple just to touch on briefly, special education increasing there with an increase in wages and benefits, additional program needs, and regular instruction, slight increase there with the contract settlements and wages and benefit increases. And then on the flip side, instructional support services decreasing. There were fewer capital items in that category. And here we have a budget to actual snapshot. So first column is the original budget that was approved, anticipating the increase in fund balance shown in the bottom line. Final budget is in the second column after a few amendments were made. And then the actual results are in the third column, showing the increase in fund balance there of $15.2 million. When we look at some explanations for that, and we start at the top, total revenues all the way over to that variance column. You see it's very close. If we apply a percentage to that, it's 0.2%. So while we talked on the couple of slides earlier that revenues increased, from a budget perspective, it's in line with the plan that you had for yourselves for some of the reason you just mentioned there, sure, as well as the state funding that you were aware of as well. Following that down on the expenditure side of things, seeing that variance, that's 5% under. That really had to do with conservative budgeting on the wages and benefit side with the contract settlements and things in that nature. Here we look at cash and investments as well as total fund balance, seeing both increasing in 2024. And then here we pull everything together for the general fund. We've touched on revenues and expenditures already, as well as that change in fund balance. And now we see the total fund balance, as we just saw on the previous slide as well, but a total fund balance of $16.3 million. All of the components of that are listed below. We start with non-spendable. So this is items for like prepaids where, think of it as the dollars have left the building. It's set aside in a separate category because you can't use that for future operations. Then there's a number of restricted components. So these are all tied to the state funding that you need to spend in accordance with how it was received. All of those categories increased cumulatively by $5.7 million. There is a category for assigned. This is more internally set aside dollars for items that you are aware of, that you're planning ahead for. And then that leaves you with the unassigned. And that balance ended the year at just under $7 million. And it is also the balance that you compare to your fund balance policy. And your fund balance policy indicates that you would strive to have an unassigned fund balance of 5% of the district's general fund expenditures. If we run the calculations, you are at 3.7%. So a nice improvement over the prior year, but still just slightly under what that fund balance policy is for that you've established for yourselves. Here we have another way for you to look at fund balance. It's slightly different than what I just mentioned in that this is unrestricted fund balance as a percentage of unrestricted expenditures, so a little bit more detailed in the calculation. It is the SOD calculation, so the state does this calculation. But it gives you the ability to compare to some state average information. So, and that's what we're doing here, seeing your increase in 2024, but some comparison to the districts of similar size and seeing where you stand in relation to that.
Yeah, I've been told that I think the rule of thumb is to be roughly about 10% in your general fund of what you have in your annual expenditure. So as an example, if you spend $200 million a year, you should have roughly $20 million in your savings account / 10%. As I'm looking at this graph, is this graph suggesting we ought to be closer to 17.5% as best practice, or is 10% still best practice?
That really is a case-by-case basis that each district is going to establish with that fund balance policy. So again, this is a little different than that fund balance policy. So this
Yep.
varies depending on all of those restricted components that you could have and things of that nature. The other, I mean, there could be that guidance out there, but the other thing that does come into play, and this is narrowed down more to districts of your size, and for, some outlying districts in the state of Minnesota, sometimes this looks different, and we drill that down to the 0 to 500 people unit, and that number is significantly different. So it can vary from district to district on what percentage that should be. It's not a decision for, me.
Correct.
It's a decision
Yeah.
for you all to make and to guide the direction and your decisions going forward. So this is just information to help you in that regard, as that's how I would look at that, as kind of where you lie, and make decisions from there.
Director Kelleher?
Well, the conversation we had during our work session in regards to this was that this is not telling us what our fund balance needs to be, that this is just a look at where we're at compared to some other districts, and the fund balance discussion is a different discussion on where we need to be able to be to keep us cash flowing and operating and protecting any expenses if we have any shortfall issues. So this isn't what this slide is intended to talk to.
Correct.
Thank you.
The next two slides that we have look at your special revenue fund, so your food service fund and then community service fund. And we start here with food service. Activity for the year did increase, part of that being the amount of meals served with the increase in pupil units that we talked about, and additionally, food costs increasing, the funding changing, things of that nature. So as a result, fund balance did increase for the year by 1.3 million and ended the year at 4.5 million. Pretty common theme that we are seeing across the state. Community service fund, similar story here, that both revenues and expenditures did increase with an increase in programming. So seeing over the 5 years kind of the journey that the fund has taken and what it has weathered over that time frame. So very exciting to see that it is back in the black and continuing to make improvements or recoup, some of that activity as things are moving back to what we're used to. Community education, the restricted component for that, seeing the nice improvement in that component this year. All right, we'll move past that one. Happy to take any further questions anyone might have.
Any further questions from board members? Director Thompson?
Yeah, I've got one comment, and then probably the second one is just more of a question, and you might be able to help me answer that one. So the first comment, not a question for you, but it's like, my observation is that in 2020, we had 11,388 students, according to what I see, and also on page 10, and in 2024, in the course of 4 years, we're at 12,121 students, so we had an increase of about 733 students in that 4-year span. And so then when I look at our financials in regards to our revenues, in 2020, we brought in $147 million in revenue between the state and property taxes. And in 2024, we brought in $198 million in revenue, which is a difference of almost $50 million. And so when I look at the difference between adding 733 students, the size of one elementary school or a small middle school, but we also brought in an additional $50 million in that 4-year span. Is that my understanding, looking at the numbers? You don't have to explain how the money is spent, but like
the
that.
733 is the resident, so that doesn't exactly equate to what you're paid off for from the state because of the open enrollment factors, but it's
Correct.
in that same,
Yep.
I do
So I think yeah.
It's a little bit less than the 700, I think.
Okay, so
for
even
the-
less. That's even worse.
But either way.
But I think in general, I think there's a broader question that I think as a board, we should probably have further dialogue, because I can't explain it. Like, hey, we brought in an extra $50 million in the course of 4 years, and we added an additional 700 students. That's it. So I don't have a good answer, and there's probably more to it over the past 4 years of what things got added and and expenditures and inflation. And not for today's discussion, but again, it's just an observation that is like, people are going to ask, like, what'd you do with the $50 million? So, separate conversation. The question that I have is more about the 6.9% in the unrestricted fund balance. And so I think I tried to ask this, and I did very poorly at the last meeting and trying to get to where I was at. So here's my question again. And this is probably not for you, but this is probably more for Bill. We ended up saving roughly, I think, about almost $9 million, close to $10 million from the general fund last year. Correct? Is that what I read?
The budget standpoint?
Yeah, from the
Is that
budget
what you're-
standpoint.
That was
yeah.
the budget.
Yep. Okay. So my scenario, my example is that, all right, if I had $100 of expenses, and then I only spent $95 in expenses, I saved myself $5. Okay. So the following year, I have $105 in expenses, is what I have budgeted for. But I have $110 in expenses. Now I'm short $5, which then makes me which tells me I'm going to break even, because I believe that there were some expenditures that we were going to anticipate having last year, but didn't materialize, and so then they're going to get carried over to the next year. That they would have to be paid out, from my understanding. So my question is the savings that we have now, is that going to decline at the end of next year because it's getting paid out? Or is the savings that we have today, right now, in our fund balance, our savings, and we're not going to dip into that for our 25-26 budget? Does that make sense?
Makes sense, but I think that's more of a
think that's a
question, not.
Mr.
for
Holmgren
being
question,
based on-
yes.
Okay.
It's going to be.
And I tried to ask that last week, and I asked poorly, but I just want to make sure that the number that we're seeing of like the $6.9 million in our fund balance, right? Is that our fund balance next year, and we're going to be adding to that, or will that be taken away because of what we were supposed to spend this year didn't materialize, but we still owe it for the next year?
We will see our fund balance grow again for when we get to June 30th, 2025. Okay, that'll continue to grow. The money that we save, that we know we have to spend, has been set aside as a restricted fund to be spent in this new year coming. So the restricted balance will go down.
Yep.
But not the unrestricted balance.
So the unrestricted fund balance is like, we saved it. We don't need to, it's not obligated towards any other expenditures for 25, 26.
Correct.
Okay, then I'm good.
Thanks for that clarity, Mr. Holmgren.
And good job.
Director Kelleher?
Just so we don't leave it on a sour note, I think what we did was an extremely great job with the audit, so thank you. The unmodified opinion is the best possible level, and this isn't the first time we've received it, and I think we're going on like 8 years in a row of getting some financial recognition for how well we are managing the district fiscally, so I appreciate what you do and what your staff does. But I think to talk about just the 700 student count and the $50 million increase, that isn't just being invested in 700 students. That's because we've got ongoing costs from COVID expenditures that are now going away, with COVID funding going away. We've got costs and inflationary contracting increases that we're dealing with from labor and vendor contracts. We've got the additional students. We have the opening of a new school. There's a lot that goes into the additional dollars that we're spending. It's not just $700 or 700 students and $50 million. So the budget is a very open book and is available online for everybody to take a look at, to know how fiscally responsible we are with what we are spending and what we're bringing in from revenues. And very proud of the work that you and your department do for the district. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
It's very well said, thank you. Any other comment or questions about the audit?
So do you.
All right. Hearing that we don't have any more, do we have a motion to approve the audit for fiscal year '24?
So moved.
So we have a motion by Director Carly Anderson. Do we have a second?
I will second that.
Second by Director Kelleher. Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, we'll put it to a vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much, and thank you for your work. right, the next item on the agenda would be the appointment process. Director Thompson, I'm going to address you first with this because this was added to the agenda at your request.
Yeah, received a few emails, did some more research, and I was going to rescind this, I was going to make a motion to rescind this, the decision that was made, just because David Anderson wasn't present, even though we were at quorum, we were not at a full board, in a decision that was made in an unprecedented manner. And so as I reached out to parliamentary procedure folks and MSBA, they're like, well, you don't need to make a motion to rescind because the motion was never called or was made for this respective decision. And so if you want to make it official, then what you need to do is just make a motion. And so I would like to make a motion to, I would like to make a motion that the fourth vote getter in the upcoming November school board election be submitted to the board to be appointed to the current open board seat pending board approval. And I believe that was the language that was used in the communications that was sent out.
Director Kelleher, did you have something you weren't raising your hand?
I made a motion, so is there a second or no?
We can ask for a second first. So we have a motion on the table to approve the fourth vote getter. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
A second by Director David Anderson. Is there any discussion on this? Director Kelleher?
Yep, so just bear with me. I have a lot of notes here that kind of recaps my thoughts and positions on what we have been through in regards to this, and I appreciate your patience in letting me get through this. So just to be clear, no matter what process, because what we were hearing from some people when we were talking about the fourth largest vote getter, they're saying, so you're telling me that you were going to appoint somebody who has not been elected by the community, being that it's the fourth largest vote getter and we're only seeking 3 seats in the election. So just to be clear that no matter what process we use for the appointment process, the selected individual will not have been elected by the community. There's a distinct difference between the selection process and the appointment process. So this seat should have been on the ballot for the voters when it was learned in May that Director Shinley would definitely no longer be serving on the board. So Director Shinley and/or Chair Baker had the responsibility to make an announcement as soon as possible to the community about the impending open seat, so it could have been on the ballot. Despite requests from board members and community members to our chair addressing the impending open seat, Chair Baker chose not to act accordingly or in a timely manner. This intentional lack of action by the chair took the opportunity away from us to add it to the ballot as part of the election process for our community to vote on. Therefore, it was then moved to the appointment process. Chair Baker has stated that the statute requires us to discuss the appointment. By selecting the fourth largest vote getter doesn't let us discuss it. But this is an inaccurate statement, as the appointment includes the process we are discussing. And this, when we discuss the appointment, we are also discussing the process and how it is to best proceed at this time for our entire community. Statute does not dictate a process and does not require a vote on the process. So keep in mind, at the October 8th work session, both Chair Baker and Director Thompson are the two who recommended moving this appointment process forward and discussed the messaging about the agreed-to process to have the superintendent share with the community the following day. And at that meeting on October 8th, Director Thompson and Chair Baker offered the The policy 209 Code of Ethics states that board members are to support the decision of the Board of Education, even if their position concerning the issue is different. And it has been demonstrated that Director Thompson and Chair Baker are not abiding by this policy at this point. And Director David Anderson did not attend the work sessions on October 1st or October 8th to actively engage in any of the board discussion on this process. Selecting the fourth largest vote getter is a board decision to give our community a voice in this process. Doing the application and interview process is a board decision that limits the voice of our community. Time and time again, during our meetings and work sessions, Director Thompson says, "Let the community decide." But interestingly enough, that's not his position in this situation. Selecting the fourth largest vote getter is a completely unbiased process. Doing the application and interview process allows for biases, and the process that Director Thompson proposed definitely allows for biases. Selecting the fourth largest vote getter allows this individual to be onboarded at the same time as the elected individuals. Doing the proposed application interview process and timeline that Director Thompson developed will not allow the appointed individual to be seated until sometime in February or March, therefore not being part of the January organization meeting or the other new board member onboarding activities. This situation is different from other past appointment situations and needs to be discussed in light of today's circumstances so we can make the best decision for our district and our community. We currently have a board member, Director Dr. Carly Anderson, seated at this table who went through the appointment process, and Chair Baker, rightly so, asked Director Dr. Anderson our thoughts about the process as she lived through it. Director Dr. Anderson has repeatedly stated that selecting the fourth largest vote getter is the best process for removing politics and political opinions about individuals. And just keep in mind that we had other critical process decisions that have been implemented in the last couple of months without any board vote. So it is not, this is not unprecedented by not voting on this process because processes do not require a vote. For instance, despite a resignation letter in hand from the former superintendent with a commitment to fulfill his contract, certain board members decided to move forward with a separation process.
Point of order, I don't think that has anything to do with the matter at hand.
A vote. And then I think that we also had the acting superintendent and interim superintendent hiring process that was not discussed or voted on by the board. And we also are spending thousands of dollars on a law firm. Board members and Chair Baker are by.
Point of order, Director Kelleher, this is not an opportunity for you to air all of the things that you disagree with.
That were not discussed and voted on by the board. And I'm just identifying that this would not be an unprecedented piece. So school board and Lakeville City Council have voted on the largest vote getter in the past, and they've also done the application and interview process. So we should be looking at what is best for our district at this moment in time.
Before we have any further discussion, board members, I would ask that you keep the discussion factual and not be calling out individual members or making accusations against people. That's not how we have it.
These are all public record.
That's not how we have a respectful discussion at the table.
This is factual and public record, the same that Director Thompson was
Correct.
allowed to do at our work session.
Correct, it is factual and public record, but it doesn't have to be disrespectful, and I feel like that is what is going on at the table. So I'm asking that we make sure that we keep the discussion respectful. Having that in mind, Director Lind, you said that you raised your hand to talk?
Yes, I'd like to talk about the motion.
Sure, go for it.
Selecting the fourth largest vote getter, something that I was in favor of when we had our discussions. And I'm thinking about, no matter what system or what method we use to select the board, the seventh board member, there's always challenges. There's always weaknesses of every system that you use. There's also strengths of every system that you use. And the reason that I favor this, to me, it ensures the community voice is being heard. I mean, the fourth place person is going to get thousands of votes. There's no question about it. That's just the trend. And all the candidates for this election are known. We know their positions. We know they're kind of vetted in our community. You know, the community knows them. So I like that part of it. And then my final point is letting the community decide, to me, ensures transparency, and any kind of bias that might come up in any other selection process is totally eliminated under this. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Lind. Director Thompson?
Yeah, you know, we got some information from legal counsel as well. Is that something that we can share, or is that something we cannot share?
It did say attorney-client privilege, but I think you can summarize the general points, as those points have already been discussed on the floor.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the general consensus from what I read was that the board has the authority to decide how they want to appoint. And so going through the vote getting process is not illegal. And so that was clear in what they shared. They also shared that it is also not a best practice that school board members and districts do at all. Just because there is tons of legal constraints or ramifications that might come out of that. So that's my interpretations, but I'll stop there with that, just because it was a 5-page letter in that respect. Let me restate that. The vote, let's say, was not unprecedented, just because you are right. We have the flexibility to have decisions during board meetings. But I think what I meant to say, what was unprecedented, was that we're doing we're doing a fourth vote getter process that I believe Lakeville has never done before. And so are you saying that in your term, you've used the fourth vote getter before? And if so, who was it? Because I don't recall.
Well, that would have been back, probably the 1990s, early 2000s, when they did, or before I was on the board, so it would have been.
Oh, so you weren't on the board?
No, it would have been early 1990s with Cheryl Forrest.
Okay, so then,
And the
but
city
when
is
you
not.
were on the board, have you ever done a fourth vote getting process before?
We've discussed it, but like I said, every circumstance is different, and you have to discuss it at the time for which is best for each situation.
Yeah, I mean, and so as an example, I mean, as I shared last week also, that I think when Senator Duckworth, when he won the November election, we knew at the time who the fourth vote getter was, but that individual wasn't selected for Zach's replacement. And then when the board went through the organizational meeting in January, there seemed to be a lack of urgency to get that open seat filled. And then a meeting occurred in March, and then a
Director
decision by the
Thompson,
board.
these are things that we've been through before as far as the
Okay.
past practice, so.
How about we do this? Let's
Yeah,
just,
well, and to
let me
be
get.
clear, law didn't require that we appointed, the law requires us to appoint in this situation. It didn't require us to
The
appoint in
language
that
is the same,
situation.
yeah. So here's my for clarification. A 3-3 tie means that a vote has failed, and then this is something that will not move forward. And so I want to make sure that my understanding of that parliamentary decision is accurate.
That's correct.
That is correct. Director Carly Anderson.
I just want to, I've been thinking a lot about this. I think we've all said our piece in terms of where we stand, and if people want to listen to how we all feel about this, there's plenty of good content in previous work sessions. I'm reflecting on what the goals of this board should be, which we should always be thinking about our kids first and what our kids are. I'm just thinking about if my child were observing this meeting, we should not be thinking about a 3-3 vote. We should be thinking about a 6-0 vote. My problem with the legal discussion that was shared with us is it's not balanced. It's targeting one process. It's not looking at, okay, what are the potential legal ramifications of any process we take? There's some of the things shared in there that could apply to anything. So it really doesn't help me kind of look at the whole. So what I'm very discouraged by is that we have not worked toward consensus at any point in this process. And I wish we could go back and start over and think about what, if we go this way, let's brainstorm, let's draw on the board over there. What are the various pros and cons of that approach? What if we go this way? What are the various pros and cons of that approach? And try to come together as a board rather than what we've been doing the whole time is half of us arguing for one side, and Dave, you weren't there to argue your opinion, but half for another, and we're not working together, which is a really, really poor example to be setting for our community and our kids. So I just want to say I'm disappointed. At this point, my greatest concern with having a 3-3 vote today, which I knew was going to happen when I saw it on the agenda, is that we have already communicated with our community about what we're going to do. And now what do we do with the 3-3 vote? We start over, and what do? We go backward on what we've said we're going to do at a time when that's supposed to be happening very quickly. So I know this is going to happen. I just want to say I'm disappointed in all of us, and I hope we can do better going forward. So
Well
that's my
said.
I would agree, Director Carly Anderson, that I don't feel like there has been a consensus on the process and how we move forward with that. And I feel like as board members, we've been so entrenched in either we're for it or we're against it that we haven't looked at options that would look at how do we make it work for both sides. For example, like one of the issues that I have with the process is that the law is, I'm a very legal person, so the law is very clear on what it states for an appointment process. And Director Kelleher, you're right, they don't tell us that what that process should be, but that the board should appoint. So one of the issues that I had with the process is that, we have been trying to work together as a team. And when we get the fourth vote getter, there's no discussion on that process. So why can't we meld that process together and say, hey, yeah, we're going to bring the fourth vote getter to the board. We're going to talk about that person as a board. We're going to look at that person. We're going to interview that person like we generally would with any appointment and carry it on from there and see where we come up with. That's a way to look at both sides of the coin there and try to find something that'll work for everyone instead of something that'll work for 3 or something that'll work for 4. I'm just throwing that out there. I'm not saying that the board has to do that, but I'm agreeing with you that I do feel like we need to be more open-minded on what that process could look like.
That was one thing that I did call into MSBA today, and that was one thing that he talked about was you could, and I think that is actually a very reasonable compromise, which is, yes, bring the fourth person in, interview them, and if we, at the end of that, do not feel like that person is a good fit, then we go to a more formal interview process that is more widespread. So at least we give that fourth vote getter the opportunity to be in that room alone and get it and secure it.
Right, well, and I also feel like it comes back to the point of contention that I had where, and I know Director Thompson shared this too, whereas if we just take the fourth person, I already voted, I may not have voted for that person, and it kind of takes my voice away as a board member as part of the appointment process, telling me I just blindly have to vote yes, which to me was, it was just hard for me to compromise that. And like I said, I'm not speaking for anybody else, but that would be a way that we could look and amend the process that we have to where we're trying to look at like what are the concerns that some people have so that we can address those concerns and move forward with the process. Director Kelleher?
I appreciate that. I think that's some of the stuff we were looking for when we had our October 8th discussion, because I think the biggest concerns that I heard coming from board members was making sure that this process ended in a time so that whoever is appointed can be onboarded with the elected members. I think that was one of the discussions, and we never did follow up on having a discussion on a different timeline. And I, appreciate the conversation about bringing that fourth vote getter to the table to have a discussion around. So I think there are compromises and ideas that can come out of this with the concerns that we had. I just think that that wasn't worked toward in the work session, and like Carly said, if we could just start this whole process over, how could we have done it differently? And but my concern is now that we've got it communicated out to the community about what that process is, I think we need to figure out how we address a tweak to what that process is.
Director David Anderson?
Well, in comment to that, I've gotten a lot of negative feedback about what happened at those meetings, and that's what I want addressed, and I didn't have an opportunity to do that.
Director Lind?
I have a question. Brian, are you willing to modify your motion to reflect that we would interview the fourth person?
No.
You're not, okay.
Director Thompson?
So I submitted a application process that leveraged best practices from the Minnesota School Board Association, best practices from Prior Lake, best practices from ASIO. And then when I shared that with the broader group, I hope I was very clear in the beginning that we are not tied to this. The application process is something for you all to react to. We can adjust timelines. Here is something that is a proposal for us to move forward with. And at the next working session, if I need to bring that back up and share some additional documents, and we want to revisit that and make tweaks along the way, I'm totally for that. If you don't need me to bring that and we want to come up with another idea or another process, I'm fine, and we can have that dialogue. So.
Director Lind?
I'd just like to comment that that's the process we've used in the past. What you
Not
wrote
his.
down is the process we use in the
No,
past.
not his.
Thank you, Terry Lynn.
His had additions to it. The process we've used in the past is the MSBA one.
Oh, that's what I thought he said.
Well, I use the MSBA's, and I
Okay.
incorporated
Okay, I'm sorry.
ASIO's, and I incorporated Prior Lakes steps that were a bit more detailed.
And he
Okay,
also incorporated some of his own.
Yep.
okay.
Well, thank you for reading it so that you know that some of it was my own. So, good.
You shared with us that
Call
it's
the
your
question?
own, so I do listen and I do my homework.
Point of order. Let's keep the discussion on where it needs to be. So we currently have a motion on the floor to approve the fourth vote getter. We've had some discussion around that. We also have a second on that motion already. So I think the next step would be to put that motion to a vote. So I just want to clarify that the motion that you have is the process that we discussed at the working session exactly.
Correct.
That's already been communicated. Right?
Correct.
Okay. All right, so any other discussion or comments on this before we put it to a vote? Director Kelleher.
Is there a motion to, I'll make a motion to amend the motion so that it is the process that we discussed, but that we would bring in that fourth vote getter for an interview, as laid out by Chair Baker. Is there a second for that?
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor to amend Director Thompson's motion, which would be to add bringing in the fourth vote getter for an interview, and then a
Along
board
with
vote.
other candidates.
Not necessarily.
No, just, I think it was just the fourth vote getter, because where would the other candidates come from?
So
Director Carly Anderson?
So I think what we talked about is we would bring the fourth vote getter in and interview them. And if there was majority support for that person, then that is the person who would be appointed. But if there was not, then we would go through a more formal interview process. So it's basically acknowledging.
Do you have your answer?
Well,
Hey,
can you be respectful? You haven't been respectful all night.
I just want to know
And
if
I
you have your
don't need
answer.
emails from everybody else. You haven't been,
Such a
we had a
fake laugh.
motion.
Point of order, point of order.
It's ridiculous.
Please.
It is
Thank you.
ridiculous.
Director
It is
Lind?
My only comment on this, I agreed with but Carly was saying earlier that we should try to come together, and it seems like that motion would be one that would have the qualities of both sides involved in it. In other words, does that make sense?
It does. It does address some of the
So
concerns I
for that
had.
reason, I would second it.
Right. I do still have some legal concerns with it, but that's neither here nor there at the time, so. Okay, so we have a motion and an amended motion. So the amended motion that's on the floor needs a second. Is there a second for that motion?
Mr. Linden.
Oh, did he? I'm sorry.
I did that.
Sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
That's
There's too
fine.
many motions going on right now.
Too many things going on.
For almost 8:30. All right, so we have the second for that. Any discussion on the amended motion of bringing in that fourth vote getter? Director Thompson?
Yeah, I don't think I have any issues with the fourth person being interviewed, but I think I have issues with when they are being interviewed. And so part of an application process, all candidates from throughout the community with whatever background that they have could apply. And so, and this is something that we can discuss at a working session at the next one, where do we want to, as we have the application process move forward, do we want to add, let's say if there are 5 candidates that we decide as a group move forward, do we want to ensure that the 4th and 5th position always, there's like a slot for that 4th or 5th person? So it guarantees that they are part of the process, of the interviewing process. But to say that we're going to interview the 4th candidate right off the bat is really no different from having that person being appointed and being presented to the board to be appointed. So I would be in favor of having that person have a slot in the application process, or have the application process have 1 or 2 slots for whoever was elected. But in regards to this respective motion, I will say no.
Director Carly Anderson, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I feel like what we're talking about is working toward compromise. So, to me, this is compromise, because we are acknowledging that the 4th vote getter had more votes than that is the person who, if they had, well, we don't exactly know what would happen if we had if we had a 4th spot on the ballot, but that person was the next person. If we open it up, that's just going to the process, that is not compromise.
But I don't think we interviewed everybody last time, did we?
No,
Or the
I
time
think you
before?
chose.
I think we narrowed it down.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess the only thing it leaves me feeling a little uneasy about is that I do have concerns from the community about it compromising election integrity, just based on the fact that they said that they would change their votes, knowing that we would be looking at that 4th vote getter. I can't speak to that as myself, but those are the concerns that I've received from community members, that they would only vote for 2, so they could strengthen the position of the 2 that they voted for. That's one thing that was talked about. I know that we also had community city council members ask if we could communicate out that people could recall their ballot. I think that time period has passed now, the deadline for that. So I guess that's a concern that's just not addressed in this process, and I just want to make sure that it's stated.
I just also want to state, we've had emails supporting this process, as well as I've seen a lot of activity on community Facebook pages and things like that supporting this process too. So it's not just been negative feedback that we've received. And I think it speaks to, again, there's division. So we shouldn't necessarily go one way based on feedback or another. I think we should make the best decision for right now.
Right. Any further discussion on this? Okay, so let's put it to a vote for the amended motion to bring the 4th vote getter in for an application process where they would interview with the board.
There would be no application process. I believe it
well,
was just an interview.
Just an interview with the board, sorry. Kim, can you do a roll call vote for this one?
So to clarify, this is a vote to.
The amended
have-
motion.
The amended motion is that the fourth vote getter would come in for an interview, and if they did not
Board would vote on it.
get the majority vote, then we would go forward with the outlined
Appointment
interview.
process.
Yes.
Correct.
No. I
Yes.
thought they were just going to come in for an interview and that was it.
No, it wouldn't be a guarantee. That could be a compromise.
Right. It would be coming
Right.
in for the interview.
Right.
And then the board would vote.
But
And
how's
if
it-
they did not get the
I'm not being
majority.
forced to vote for somebody.
Yes.
Correct.
Yep.
Yes, you're not
Which
being
I'm
forced to
upset
vote.
about.
Yes.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
Right.
Yes.
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 This is only for an interview, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Brian Thompson?
No.
Carly Anderson?
Yes.
Did you get Terry?
Terry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes.
I was looking at Bree's spot.
That's all right. That's all
I
right.
was, I thought I had a gap here. I wasn't sure.
So that motion passes 5-1. I would ask for, there's going to be a 5-minute recess between this meeting and our next meeting as we start a working
Wait.
session.
Hey, that was to amend the motion. Now we have to actually vote on that.
Vote on the original motion.
Well, that was the vote to amend the motion. Now we
gotta
have to vote on the
whole
motion.
Okay. So now we're voting on the whole motion, which would be with the amendment, correct?
Yes, the
Which we already-
amended motion.
That's weird.
Which I made, which Terry seconded, and now we have
Okay.
to vote on the
Okay, can somebody
amended
read that
motion.
out so it's on the record, please?
Judy, can you state that whole thing so that it's on the record?
The amended motion was to bring in the fourth vote getter to interview with the board
Right.
for appointment
Which that amended motion passed, so now we're voting on,
on that amended motion.
The first part was to accept the amendment. The
oh, okay,
second is
now
to-
we're voting on the amended.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I just want to clarify because it's
Yeah.
very confusing.
Yeah, we have to do two votes on it, one to accept it and then one to actually vote on the amended motion.
Okay, Kim, can you do a roll call vote for that one again?
Oh, can I,
Do you
further
have-
discussion on this?
Sure.
Yeah, and so I just want to make sure I'm clear on this one, because I think I'm still confused, because I don't think it's any different from what we had, because
It is different.
if you got a person coming in and you're doing an interview with that person, is it a working session? Is it during a regular board meeting? And then are we voting during that interview session to decide, do we want to bring this person forward to be the appointee? And then with that person comes forward, and then we vote on that person to be the appointee. And so the original proposal was that the fourth vote getter would be the one submitted via resolution. I would assume that we would be discussing that resolution and then voting on that person. The only thing that you have added to this entire process is an interviewing step. And then,
An interview with the option for the board to vote yes or no, which was not included in the original process.
yeah, but that's no different from
Yeah, it
the
is.
person coming on
That
the
is.
resolution and then you
it's
voting
big.
yes or no.
It is.
It is
It
very
is.
big.
Got
It is.
it, got it.
It is very big.
It is because.
It's very big.
Sorry.
Oh, you go.
I feel like it's different because when we make a decision, like we talked about earlier, according to our policy, we should, as a board, when we vote in favor of that decision, we should be moving forward with that. So one of the things I expressed last time when we met was if we were to all agree, or not agree, but majority agree that that was going to be our process, and then let's say you voted no at the time of appointment, that feels like it's going against the board decision. So this decision is now changing to, we bring the fourth vote getter in to interview, and every board member gets to vote.
Exactly.
And if that,
So that's,
if that person does not get the majority of the board vote, then we would move forward with the appointment process. That was the motion.
Yep.
Director Thompson.
And so I think the point that I'm trying to raise is that you're presenting the board one person, And so part of the appointment process is an application process where you have a variety of folks from across the community that would raise their hand and to participate. So, and I have no concerns with the fourth vote getter or the fifth or the ninth who may want to apply and say, I feel I'm qualified to be an appointed board member. And so you are now eliminating all of those people right off the bat, which I don't think is appropriate. So part of the application process, it gives you that avenue to add all those people. Plus, if the fourth vote getter person wants to be on it, they can apply. Again, like I shared earlier, if we decide as a group that 5 individuals is who we're going to interview, the 5th slot can always be, assigned to that particular person so that that person still has an opportunity to interview. But what you are telling me now is that while I do get to vote yes or no for that individual, you've cut off everyone else from being able to apply in an appointment process.
No, just for a certain amount of time.
No, this would
No,
be.
because if we don't vote for that person, then the process kicks in.
This is a compromise based on trying to get the board to come to some consensus around this, and trying to alleviate some of the concerns that other people had. I think we're going around in circles saying the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
And I also want to be mindful of time because we have another meeting that starts at 8:30 and our team needs 5 minutes to reset.
I'm sorry, Chair Baker, can I just make one statement of clarification, though?
Sure.
If we have a pool of people that are going to be interested in applying for the appointed position, and if we go forward with what's being proposed right now, those people have to just hang tight because they'll have the opportunity to run for election before the end of the year is over. So,
Correct, 'cause this seat does still have to go to election.
People who want to participate in this process to be part of the process.
Okay, so like I said, I feel like we've discussed everything on this. Kim, let's just do a roll call vote, and, because I feel like we've said everything, unless there's something that hasn't been said that someone feels like they need to.
We need that to have another motion and second to get to the vote.
But we already did that.
Well, that was on the
There-
amendment, so I'll make a motion to accept the motion as amended.
There's so many motions.
my
There we go.
Director Kelleher has the first. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Director Carly Anderson.
You state the whole thing for the record.
Director Kelleher did, yes. We've already had discussion, so we'll go ahead and put it to a vote. Kim, can you do a roll call, please?
Terry Lynn,
Yes.
Brian Thompson,
No.
David Anderson,
Yes.
Judy Gallagher,
Yes?
Kim Baker,
Yes,
Carly Anderson,
Yes.
thank you. Motion carries 5-1. What I was originally going to say before we move on to the superintendent's report is that I feel like the discussion got pretty tense at this table, and we are trying to build relationships with each other. And when we call each other out at the table like that, it doesn't help us build relationships with one another, and I feel that's very important. So in the 5-minute recess that we need between these two meetings, board members, please reach out to each other and talk to each other and have a conversation and clear the air before we move on, because we do need to work as a team, and I feel like that's important. All right, so I'll go ahead and pass it off to the superintendent for the superintendent's report.
Madam Chair, I'll defer in the interest of time in the next agenda item.
Thank you very much. All right, do we have a motion to adjourn this meeting?
So moved.
We have a motion by Director Lind. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Director Carly Anderson. Any further discussion? I hope not. All right, hearing none. We'll put it to a vote. All in favor of adjourning the meeting, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you and good night.